Ultron is coming to Marvel Rivals, and at the time of making this, we don't know how he's going to play. Well, not officially. We'll get into that in a moment. But here at the Hamato House, we like to make things, most notably Marvel Rivals character concepts. And I thought I'd try my hand at making someone who we know for certain is coming soon. So today, we're going to come up with a version of Ultron for each and every class. First off, we have to talk about the supposed leak. This did come out during a time when Rivals was rampant with pretty accurate leaks, and it's where we get our first look at the now confirmed design for Ultron in the game. But alongside that, we also got a vague idea of how he would play and what role he'd serve. It seemed that, according to those leaks, he'd be a strategist focused on implementing drones to help his team out. Now, I haven't refreshed myself on the leaks for the sake of this video, and I don't want to. The point of these are not to predict what NetEase will make or to tell them how it should be done, but to instead have fun and come up with a creative idea for how Ultron could fit into the game. Ultron is the creation of Hank Pym, aka Ant-Man, and it's an uncontrollable AI hell-bent on world domination. He's arguably one of the smartest things in the Marvel universe, and even orchestrated the near destruction of everything via Annihilation Wave. Alternate futures like Age of Ultron and Next Avengers have shown us the kind of world he strives for, and it isn't exactly what one would call pretty. But really, at his core, there are a few traits I think are essential to Ultron. I want to include all of these in each of my kits today, but I'm also going to pick one for each kit to really focus in on and explore, since Ultron is such a cool and quintessential Avengers villain. Firstly, Ultron is all about the rise of machines, and more specifically, the eradication of organic life. Ultron doesn't help others, especially humans, but he is willing to do what's best for him. This means that whilst I would never believe a world where Ultron heals an ally, I could believe one where he attaches nanotech to try and roboticize them, Cyberman style, and as a byproduct, they are enhanced in health and in strength. Second to that, Ultron is never satisfied. He needs perfection, not just in his world, but in himself, constantly building new bodies, better models, all to upgrade and improve himself. You know, he really is just like the Cybermen, come to think of it. The final key trait of Ultron is a side effect of his upgrades. He builds backups, duplicates, clones, an army of himself. Ultron never strikes alone. There's always a drone or a sentry nearby that could help him, or if all else fails, it's there for him to quickly upload his consciousness to and escape. That being said, I think it's time we stopped wasting time and started making these kits. Let's begin with the Strategist. I said before that Ultron isn't exactly the type to just help others, let alone heal them. And I don't mean in a literal power sense. No, I actually reckon Ultron is capable of healing people better than the actual roster of strategists currently in the game. The guy is a literal anything machine. He could harbor an entire hospital in his chest if he really wanted. No, what I mean is he thrives on seeing life destroyed. And so I instead want to create a system where Ultron is focusing on transforming his team, building Trojan horses in their bloodstreams as to make them more like him. I call this kit the Assimilation Ultron, and you'll likely hear that word a lot. Now, since this is an Ultron who doesn't worry too much about healing, his primary fire is a damage-only attack, using concussive force to blast enemies. It has no reload and a far range, but low damage to sort of balance itself. I kind of imagine him functioning a lot like Warlock in how he relies on cooldowns to help his allies, and less so a secondary fire like Rocket or Jeff. But before we delve into those cooldowns, I want to explain an idea I had for the mechanic his whole kit will center around. This might at first seem pretty complex, but trust me, once it's all explained, it's actually really simple. You see, Ultron has a passive called Assimilation, and this basically means all his allies have 4 little markers under their health bars. Then Ultron is going to have abilities that either turn those markers red or blue, and then filled in markers of either color will give give the ally buffs throughout the match. As they gain new coloured markers, old ones will disappear, limiting each hero to a max of 4 coloured in markers. It would kind of work like one of those old tactical crayons you'd get at like family restaurants, where when you push the new colour into the bottom of it, the old one pops out the top. A really weird analogy, but I do think it gets the point across. The ally would also lose the oldest marker whenever they're KO'd, as to keep some degree of natural degeneration throughout the match, punishing teams that are constantly dying. The final part of this passive is that whenever Ultron is KO'd, if there is a nearby ally with 4 coloured in markers, he will instantly respawn behind them and remove all of the markers from that hero. This would act kind of like it's Ultron ejecting from the parts he's placed on them, like he's got a backup body already built there that he often is seen doing in other media. Also, for context going forwards, thanks to Overlord, Ultron has a flight movement type. Much like Iron Man, his other classes are grounded, so I thought this at least gives us an idea of what a flying strategist might look like in the future. Now for his cooldowns, the first is his main defensive ability, Vibranium Nanoweave. He can select a target and turn one of their assimilation markers blue. What do blue markers do? Well, for every blue marker a hero has, they get a small reduction to incoming damage. One marker wouldn't be very notable, but really acting as a minor bonus. But 2 or 3 or heaven forbid 4 markers on a hero, and things become really noticeable. Alongside that, he also has Apex Boost, which turns 2 of a hero's markers red. Unlike blue markers, red ones are aggressive. For every red marker an ally has, they gain a minor increase to the damage they deal. Like blue, however, one marker isn't much, but the more they have, the better it gets. So you already have to think about balancing what color each teammate has and how many of each color they have and what order you give them your cooldowns, as to make sure your team have the best amount of buffs available for each hero. Gives it a bit of macro play on knowing what heroes are better to have more reds on, what ones are better to have more blues on, when you should top up a hero versus when you should focus on your other allies, stuff like that. Finally, we get Ultron's way of healing his friends. As I said, I don't want him to center around heals, but I think a good strategist is one with a varied kit, and good Ultron players will be able to show skill expression through management of the blue and red assimilation markers on their allies. Arc Transmitter has Ultron produce a burst of energy that heals allies within its range. Everyone affected heals a flat instant amount, like a super burst basically. But then, following that, allies will receive additional healing for each colored assimilation marker they have, meaning if Ultron is buffing and helping you with his abilities, he can then burst you for a large chunk of health back when you're low, turning the tide of the fight. As an Ultron player, you kind of have to keep in mind how many markers is on a player, and therefore how much health can you really give them with your healing, so whether or not it's worth giving it sooner or holding off until their health gets a bit lower and then healing them. There is that sort of decision making for the player. Eventually though, as you build assimilation and then burn it all in respawns, your ult will charge up, preparing the battlefield for the Age of Ultron. I just had to name it that. I mean, it just makes sense. When activated, all of Ultron's allies receive 4 multicolored markers. This grants them the effects of having both 4 blue and 4 red markers for a short time. And during that time, Ultron also receives these perks, along with having Arc Transmitter now additionally deal damage to enemies. Once the ult ends, Ultron loses his perks and all allies have their markers turned half red, half blue, so 2 of each. This means that it's not only a way to turn Ultron and his team into killing machines for a short period of time, but it also sets him up for a complete refresh on the battlefield's marker count, ensuring his team all have buffs going forwards. So a great time to pop this would be if you've respawned and then say your ally has lost all their markers and maybe the rest of your team isn't fully up on them because they've been dying or you just haven't been able to manage it properly. Suddenly an ult is not only going to give you guys a turn in the actual team fight, but following that turn, all of your allies are now going to be rebuffed, so you're in a good starting spot. Of course, I can see Ultron arriving with some fun team ups, and should he one day enter the game, Hank Pym is a must, just to acknowledge where Ultron came from. But for this kit, I gave him Trickster's Double, a passive team up that means when Ultron would consume Loki's assimilation markers, he instead respawns at one of Loki's clones, destroying that and not destroying the markers. This means that Ultron can obviously respawn in more spots, and it keeps the buffs on Loki, but of course at the cost of destroying a clone. I could also see it just temporarily freezing the clone as to not hurt Loki's kit, because, you know, people don't particularly want their clones getting destroyed. Or maybe Loki gets a special team-up clone you can summon that this interacts with instead. I don't know, but I just think it would be fun to give the two villain strategists a way to interplay together. Now, I really enjoy the idea of the assimilation system I've made here, but maybe you want to enjoy an Ultron who gets up close and dirty with his enemies, enforcing his wrath personally. And for that, you'll want our Duelist Ultron. Ultron's constant need for perfection might be his most used character flaw. It always feels like he's striving to push to a new model, a new form, and that means he needs some special material or rare machine that can give him what he needs. And thinking of that, the idea of upgrading over time, I realize Rivals hasn't got any skill tree based heroes. In fact, most hero shooters don't. Now, there's a valid reason for that. If you make them a weaker hero who gets stronger as you play, it means that they aren't good early game, when some of the most vital plays happen. And it also locks a player into being that hero, since if they switch, they've wasted all the effort and time they put into building them up. And then if you have the hero play fine initially, you risk them dominating every match once they complete their upgrades. Now, there's some obvious ways to fix this, of course. You could have a system where upgrading something will always delete an old upgrade or weaken other abilities, acting more like you're specializing in a part of the kit instead of actually upgrading. But I'm not going to do that, no. Instead, I've tried to build a kit that has a variety of upgrades, but also lets you remain relevant at every turn in the match. This is also a kit I have slightly altered after making the art for it. Nothing major in how any of the abilities work, just one tweak I think really makes it more practical in an actual hero shooter, that being involving the ult and how that works. So I'll go over that at the end of the kit. Starting off, our Duelist Nightmare has a plasma burst, something he's going to hold on to throughout the match. An energy blast from his fingertips that works almost identically to Iron Man's, just a basic way of making those who oppose his rule feel some pain. Of course, this is accompanied by Concussive Blast, a short-range shotgun-like blast that either would have a 2-second cooldown or a slow wind-up, like the Thing's Haymaker, as to prevent spamming. Really, this would act kind of like a finishing blow of his kit, the big hitter. Ultron also comes with a block mechanic in the form of Sentry. This would have him pulling out half of a built robot to eat any incoming attacks, obviously exploding instead of him. That, or I kind of like the idea that when you use this, he rips himself open and steps through, like that one scene in the films, just because it's cold as fuck. He of course needs a way to get around, and that's exactly where Rocket Boost comes in handy. Ultron has 2 charges for this ability, and it propels him in any direction, dashing into or out of the fray. And finally, we have Annihilate. This involves Ultron raising his hand and slowly constructing a powerful rocket in the air. The rocket's charge is represented by 3 parts clunking together one at a time, and then it fires forwards, exploding on impact. Overall, this kit is alright. It's got coverage and a decent damage output, but it's missing that flair, and that's where Visionary comes in. Named after one of Ultron's greatest designs, Vision, this has Ultron upgrading part of his body to better suit his personal needs. This is also where my post-creation change comes in, by the way. Originally, the way this worked was that Ultron could upgrade each one of his cooldowns until there were no upgrades left, at which point Visionary changed into Age of Ultron, which acted as a new ult where Ultron did some cool stuff. But now I've decided Ultron actually has access to Age of Ultron at any time he uses the ult after the first use of it. And then with every upgrade you take from Visionary, Age of Ultron will get a little bit better alongside the kit, gaining a new element based upon which upgrades you take. The upgrade you do choose to grab can be grabbed in any order, adding in a bit of player decision on where your priorities lie. You just basically have to use the cooldown input when you press the ult. And if you're curious how you trigger Age of Ultron instead, well, you just press his basic fire, since that one doesn't get any upgrades. Should Ultron choose to upgrade Concussive Blast, his heavy hitting attack, it would gain a knockback effect, effectively keeping foes at the right sort of distance whilst maintaining that pressure. Should you prefer to upgrade Sentry, my personal favorite of the upgrades, the ability will gain a second feature. When Ultron uses Sentry and doesn't block an incoming attack, the drone activates and flies beside him for a short while. While beside him, it acts like Magneto and Psylocke's Emma Frost team-up ability and copies his attacks as he performs them. Rocket Boost upgrade means that holding down the dash button enters Ultron into a limited time free flight mode, much like Star-Lord, only he's able to shoot in the free flight stance. Then the final upgrade available, out of our list at least, is Annihilate, which lets Ultron charge up not 1 but to 3 rockets. Obviously he has to consistently hold the button to charge up to those, they're not simultaneous, but it means he can have multiple ready before he enters an engagement. Each of these upgrades unlock a different piece of Age of Ultron. And as I said before, I am changing it because I much prefer it that you can use Age of Ultron at any point, so when you're using Visionary, you have the choice to permanently make yourself better or to actually ult on your enemies. I just think it gives, choice is always better, right? Also, I think it's really interesting to see what upgrade paths people would take in the fights. So Concussive Blast means that Age of Ultron halves all cooldown times for its duration. Sentry means that it summons 2 sentries that constantly fire at nearby targets and follow you. Rocket Boost means that it removes the limited gauge from your free flight, effectively turning you into an Iron Man or a Johnny Storm. And Annihilate means that you have the ability when you use Annihilate during the ult to charge up to 3 rockets at the same time instead of having to wait for one after the other, which means that if you get all of the upgrades and use Age of Ultron, you can fly around freely, charge up to 3 rockets simultaneously while drones fly beside you shooting enemies, and all your cooldowns including Annihilate are halved. So at the end here, we have basically a hero who improves throughout the match but never lacks below the roster or ends up breaking the game inherently, showing displays of character knowledge through the order you choose to upgrade and when a player might want to go nuclear with Age of Ultron. I think overall it's really fun, and whilst I don't see a skill tree hero entering the game anytime soon, I do think it's a fun concept that you could take it further and really explore. Now for the final iteration of Ultron. A man who exists as a disposable army can eat a lot of damage, allowing the rest of his team to press on. That's right, it's time for the Vanguard Ultron. As I just said, Ultron is practically a disposable army, and that means he needs the power to build more of himself. The turret hero is a trope often reserved for duelists, but I think a turret hero can just as well work as a Vanguard. For this kit, I wanted to really focus in on the whole endless bodies shtick and live the fantasy of facing off against the endless horde of Ultron. First off, we have his primary fire, and this would be a plasma ray, a beam attack that overheats as it's used. There's no ammo, but obviously you can't keep it up forever. A nice start to a Vanguard who's meant to always push on and take space. Then we have the first of his cooldowns, Attack Sentry. Ultron can have up to 2 sentries on the battlefield at any one time, and one type that he can choose from for this is Attack. Attack sentries appear to be the top half of Ultron, and they hover in place, shooting enemies within a set range. Basically, they're just bigger monstro spawns. The other kind of sentry is a defense sentry, and these, unlike the attack sentries, hold up large shields that block incoming attacks and enemy heals, letting Ultron section off the battlefield and leave a defensive wall for his strategists to hide behind. Now these would work much like most energy walls work in hero shooters where you can walk through them. They're not quite like group walls, for example. The final piece of his active kit is Concussive Shield. Using his concussion generators, Ultron creates an energy shield much like caps that he holds aloft. When this takes enough damage, it breaks, and in doing so blasts a chunk of damage forwards and applies a large amount of knockback to anyone hit by said damage. Whether blown up or lowered by Ultron, the shield goes on a cooldown after its use. Prematurely lowering it, obviously, it doesn't deal the damage, and then that does shorten the cooldown time, probably by like 2 seconds, because it wouldn't be a long cooldown time no matter what. Finally, to round off this powerhouse kit, we have New Chassis. You see, if Ultron is KO'd, the nearest sentry deploys legs, and he immediately respawns in a new body. This obviously destroys the sentry, but it engages Ultron back into the fight immediately. Now, I imagine this would have a cooldown, more than likely. It wouldn't always be usable, but I do think the idea of having to destroy his turrets before you can even consider killing him works so well as a unique version of shield. We're not just giving him some stupidly large health bar, or making his shield really powerful, or giving him a way to regen health. No, you have to basically destroy his turrets to get rid of him. And I think that's really fun, and it's very Ultron, let's be honest. Overall, we have a shield hero who can set up amazing defense with his drones. Teaming him up with someone like Namor or Penny could completely control a point, especially one like the domination game mode. And as you mitigate incoming threats, you will gain access to Ultron's Armada. This destroys all active drones, but then immediately summons 2 defensive drones behind Ultron and 2 attack drones in front of him. During the ult's duration, Ultron's sentries walk with him and his gun cannot overheat. Once the time ends, the front 2 sentries deactivate and the back 2 sentries transform into attack sentries unless Ultron is holding his shield up when the ult ends. If Ultron is holding his shield up when the ult ends, the back 2 sentries deploy as defense sentries. Overall, I think it makes for a super fun kit, and whilst this was definitely the one I dreaded making the most, since I just didn't know where I was going to go with it, I actually think it might be my favorite. Then again, I do really like the Strategist kit too. Of course, I gave the Vanguard a team up as well. Since I mentioned enough here, I thought it only made sense to implement Aquatic Intelligence, aka AI. Namor can place a special monstro spawn, like his Ice or Gamma one, onto a sentry. This will either increase the speed of the attack sentry, or it will increase the health of a shield or defense sentry, turning the shield blue or making the attack bullets made of water. Overall, I hope you all enjoyed these kits. I'm excited to see how Ultron plays on release, and thank you all for sticking through the month of madness. This is the final video in our little month challenge, so expect some semi-regular uploads weekly here on out, and I'm glad to see the channel growing. Don't forget to leave your ideas for a chance to be mentioned in our subscriber special, which I want to make next on the channel. So if you do comment below, this is the last video to get a chance for me to break down your ideas for Marvel characters to be added into the game in that video. Of course, if you want to know when that video goes live, make sure to subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Thank you all for the endless support.